You're listening to a Pop House Network podcast for developers by developers. So hello and welcome to the Stack Podcast, episode number 57, recorded on March 11th, 2022. I am Kito Mann, and I'm here with my co-host, Daniel Hinojosa. And unfortunately, our other co-host, Josh Juneau and Ian Hlavats, could not make it today. So you got us. And we do have a couple special guests, though. So there's got lots of interesting things to talk about. But first, how are you doing, Dano? What you been up to the last month?
Good. Yeah, I had a testing class, which is going to fit right into our guests. So I can't wait to ask some questions and know where I went wrong. But also just turned 50. So
congrats.
Way over the hill now, a downslope, and enjoyed that in Hawaii. So had never been to Hawaii, so pretty stoked about that. One would think that would be relaxing, and I couldn't wait to get back to work. I am here to inform everyone it did not. So, I still look at my computer as just like, oh, the workplace is still here, but no, I'm still doing well. I made it across that 50 line. We'll see what the future holds, but yeah, that's been my bio the last couple months.
Very nice. Yeah, my brother turns 50 in a week, but I don't want to get too into geopolitics, but I think one thing obviously that's happened since our last podcast is the whole Russia-Ukraine thing, and it just so happens my brother lives in Russia, so he lives in Moscow, and he happened to be in the U.S. with his family for a business trip when this whole thing started, and he's going to stick around in the U.S. for a while until going on. But I was thinking, man, what a great 50th birthday present. Like, he's probably going to be stuck here. Wondering.
You should go to Hawaii.
Yeah, that's what you
should
do. You should go to Hawaii.
Yeah, totally. And what better way to spend your 50th birthday than in the 50th state? I didn't realize that there was a.
Yeah.
Plus, I was there and I met I met two people that were also celebrating their 50th birthday. So we were talking about things like, just 70s stuff and just things that we know. And, so it was really great.
Yes. My daughter would call that old timey.
I know, right? When you listen to the classic, like Duran plays on the classic rock station, I'm like,
I know.
When did this transpire? I'm like, what's going on?
It's like all the oldies music. How come it's not 60s and 50s anymore?
Right.
Yeah.
But we're further away from the 80s than the 80s were from the 60s, I think, or something like that.
Yeah.
They always keep mentioning that. So
that's a good point.
They're definitely oldies now. Yeah.
Yep. So other than the whole war thing, I think for me, what have I been doing? Just been busy doing consulting on a couple of projects, haven't gone anywhere. And the projects are still like, we're doing some mobile. I think I mentioned this last time. We're using this library capacitor to wrap a React app, which is kind of an interesting thing. And a couple old legacy Java projects. And also there's a new project that I'm working on, which I'll probably maybe announce next podcast, a new little product that we're working on. And so that's been kind of fun as well. So no trip scheduled for me. I'm still hanging out at home. So that's pretty much it for me. I did do a talk at the St. Louis Java Users Group last night about GraphQL again, GraphQL and Java and just GraphQL in general. So that's always fun. Been really interested in GraphQL lately. So it's fun stuff. So without further ado, let me introduce our guests. We've got two today. We have Seb Rose. Hello, Seb. And Gaspar. Hello.
Hello, everyone. Yeah.
And they are behavior-driven development extraordinaires. So they've both been working on, I know Seb and I think both of you have been very involved with Cucumber and BDD in general and other tools such as SpecFlow, which I don't know much about, which I'll want to learn more about. So why don't you guys just start and tell us about yourselves and sort of just a quick rundown about who you are, what you do, and what you've been up to lately.
Okay, so I'm Seb, I'm in Scotland. What I've been doing lately, I've been doing not very much lately, to be perfectly honest.
Oh, nice.
But I was part of the Cucumber team at Cucumber Limited that got acquired by SmartBear in 2019. So the work that I've been doing has been internal to SmartBear for the past year. I've been working on the engineering team, trying to spin up some training, internal training for development teams, because SmartBear is one of those companies that has grown by acquisition. So they've got companies all over the world, including, just to follow on from what you just said there, including Russia. And so it'll be interesting to see how that develops over the coming months. So that's what I've been doing, but I've now transitioned back to a new organization within SmartBear, and I'm now a developer advocate. So although I've been hunkered down, like so many other people in lockdown, I'm going to be getting out onto the airways and the trainways and whatever of the world and jogging over to conferences. And I'll be over in the States at Nashville at the Agile conference in July this year. So
cool.
Looking forward to that.
We'll add that to our list of conferences at the end. That'll be nice to add. Cool. And I should mention you're also an author, right?
Well, I guess you could mention that. So yeah, Gaspar and I are co-authors of the BDD series of books. So it's two books so far. So I guess you could call it a series. The third book is in the pipeline, and be happy to talk about that. I'm supposed to be working on a reissue of the Cucumber for Java book, an updated second edition, but somehow never quite seem to find time for that one. So yeah, focus on the BDD series of books. We've also been over in SmartBear land. We've been porting a video training, a set of video training classes to an online learning platform, and it's called Cucumber School, and it's free and available. And hey, maybe we can talk about that later. So there's a lot of things going on, little bits and pieces going on all over the place.
Okay, very nice. Yeah, and I should mention Seb was actually on our podcast many years ago talking about the Cucumber for Java book. So it's kind of great to have him back.
You know what? I think Seb was, I got to go back to the books, but maybe you would know as our podcast historian there, Kito. Was he our first guest? Like we were just like spouting news all the time. I'm venturing to guess was Seb our actual first guest, and then we got a taste for it. And then we started just like inviting people over.
Yeah, I think if he wasn't, technically this podcast started out as I had way back in the day, I had the JSF Central podcast.
That's right. I was a guest. Yeah, that's right.
So there I had guests, but then we changed it, sort of morphed it into the JSF and Java EE newscast.
Right.
And I think for that, we didn't really do guests. And I think Seb was one of the first guests we had.
Right.
So, and then of course we changed to the Enterprise Java newscast, and now it's the Stack podcast.
Right. Yeah.
So it's changed a lot over the years, but yeah, I remember that because I remember we didn't stick to our topics at all. We basically went off and talked about BDD for a large percentage of the time. So
that was exciting. I'll probably ask the same questions because I don't remember the questions I asked last time.
Yeah, that's fair enough.
Yeah. All right. So, Gaspar, let's.
Yeah.
Yeah. So my name is Gaspar Nagy. That's a Hungarian name, impossible to pronounce for anyone who is not Hungarian, unfortunately. I live here in Budapest, Hungary. And basically what I was doing or what I'm doing nowadays is mainly related to BDD and all the things that are around that. Actually, I'm running a small business where I'm doing BDD trainings, sometimes agile testing trainings as well, and also a lot of other things that are related to book writing, newsletter, and I also have a small product which is related to BDD. It's basically about how to help companies solving some traceability problems, especially for regulated big enterprises. So which is also good for me because I can still keep my hands dirty with coding, and obviously I can also always use that as a test for any of the BDD related things that I'm thinking on. So yeah, I think these are the things that I'm doing nowadays.
Cool, very cool.
Nice. Now, were you working together before, or have you just known each other in the community?
No, we didn't work together, and I think, I knew Seb because this BDD community was small, and even today it's not very big. But I think we met because of the Cucumber Java book that Seb was working on, and when I was trying to find some co-author for an upcoming SpecFlow book, which we haven't done yet at the end. Then we just somehow found each other and thought that, okay, let's try that together. Mm-hmm. And I think this was, I don't know how many years ago, but definitely more than 5-6 years ago. And since then we are having a very active work relationship because of the book. So we usually have a weekly or bi-weekly catch-up session every Friday, and so of course when we are dealing with the book, but also can discuss a lot of other things, and so I think by now we know well each other, and I think it's
nice.
I always enjoy those sessions because I think Seb and I are good complement of each other. I mean, he's very strict in a sense that he likes to put everything in order, and I'm sometimes dreaming, and then I think this combination is
right.
making outcome, or at least I like that.
Yeah, most sagas are like that. You got to have that pairing of one with order and the other with chaos, and then you just make something truly great.
Yeah.
Well, so let me ask. I think I know what BDD is, but I am error prone. So let me ask the pros. What is BDD?
I think Seb's connection might be out. I don't know. He's definitely freezing.
It could look that way. Okay,
yeah,
we'll see if he comes back.
Yeah. So it's up to you, Gaspar. What is that?
So BDD is basically, I would say it's a software development methodology, and which basically focuses on having a better or more proper understanding of the problem before actually jumping into the solution. And once we have that better understanding and we are actually jumping into the solution, it just gives some sort of guideline or something that you can relate to, and you can track your progress and get early feedback about whether you are really going into the right direction. So yeah, especially if you are trying to contrast that with TDD, that some people say that TDD is about doing the thing right, and BDD is more about doing the right thing. So trying to figure out what really the problem was and how to make a solution that is not just a good solution, but it's really solving the overall business problem.
Yeah, one of the things that I learned, and we'll see if I'm correct with the most knowledgeable group here, is that BDD. So there's a language called Gherkin where you can, and I'm sure many already know, given when then we could talk more about the language. But read some others that say BDD is not Gherkin. BDD is, it's certainly an element of it, but that's not the focus. The focus is communication. Would you agree with that? As really that's the core of BDD?
Definitely. I think Gherkin and given when then is nowadays an important part of that because somehow you have to put these things into practice. but definitely BDD is not Gherkin. I think many people don't know, but when BDD, the idea of BDD has started by Dan North, I think in 2003 or something like that. There was not even no given when then and Gherkin at that time. So that was basically just coming to this bucket somehow later on, where people wanted to find some practical solution to make this happen. Yeah.
So, Seb, are you back?
I am back.
All right, there you go. And all right, yeah, go ahead, Seb.
So behavior. So when Gash was absolutely correct, when Dan North first coined the term behavior-driven development, there was no Gherkin. In fact, though, when he first coined the term behavior-driven development, he wasn't talking about what we now talk about when we mention behavior-driven development. He was talking about how can we encourage developers to follow a TDD-like approach. And his theory was, well, let's not use the test word. Let's call it behavior-driven development so that they don't feel like they're doing testing. But BDD has moved a long way since then. Mm-hmm. So when I was just offline, I'm not sure whether Gaspar has already covered this, but in our first book, Discovery, we channel one of the inspirational people in the BDD community, a woman called Liz Keogh, also known as Lunivore. And she basically identified that the BDD approach could be roughly thought of in three distinct segments that get followed in sequence. And the first one is called Discovery, and that's the activity of bringing cross-discipline, multidiscipline people from the team together to do the refinement, the detailed requirements definition. And this is akin to Three Amigos, which is a term that is quite familiar in the Agile community. So it's a place where you bring the product owner, the business analysts, some developers, a tester or two in, and they actually work on the requirements to make sure that they all understand exactly the same thing, rather than just throw the requirements over the fence. So discovery is the first thing that you should do on any story that comes in, because typically it needs refined. Even a lot of traditional agile ways of working have a refinement phase, and they call that grooming, which is kind of horrible. But nonetheless, so you could do your discovery and you end up with a detailed requirement that is, everyone on the team, everyone responsible for delivering this software has the same understanding of what it entails.
And
having got to that,
yeah, go ahead.
Ask away.
Oh no, I was just going to say, just to add to that, it seems like one of the benefits for this is to keep developers from going off-road and creating solutions for things that weren't even required or even needed to begin with. Would you say that's true?
That's true. So the discovery gets us to the point where we know what we want, and everybody has that shared understanding. But we all know that you can get in a room and everyone gets to the same place, and a week later you've forgotten what it was that you agreed, and people have got different memories of it. So the second phase is we call formulation, which is where you take that detailed understanding and you capture it using business terminology, so in a way that is unambiguous and will stand the test of time. And this is where Gherkin frequently comes in, and I guess we can talk about that later. So we go through discovery to get to the shared understanding, and the techniques that Gaspar and I typically use are called example mapping, and that leads us to scenarios, which are concrete examples of how a particular piece of functionality should behave. And those scenarios are written during the formulation phase. And once you've got the scenarios written out in business readable language, well, then we automate them. And of course, because you're describing functionality doesn't exist yet, those automated scenarios will fail as soon as you run them. And it's those failing scenarios that lead the developers or guide the developers in their implementation. And as they do implementations in the space of the scope of the story that they're working on, those failing scenarios will begin to pass. And that's why we call it behavior-driven development. We start off by talking about the behavior. We discover what the behavior should be. We then formulate the behavior that we've discovered and capture it in a business readable document which will stand the test of time and help us maintain the software in the future. And then finally, we automate that documentation, and that guides our developers to develop exactly what it is that we've agreed on. And that helps them do the development. And later on, it helps us modify and update the software, because that automated documentation, that automated specification acts as a test safety net, as an acceptance test to allow us to make sure that we haven't broken something when we add new features or fix a defect.
So let's take a step back. So this process makes total sense. And I've used variations of it, never the complete, never as beautiful as you described it, unfortunately. So you're talking about this process at what scope? Is it at the story level, at like a higher level than that? Like when you describe this process, where are you seeing it?
So if you go, I'll answer in words. But first off, the reference to anyone listening, the cucumber.io website has, I wouldn't say it's the world's best documentation, but if you go to a page which is entitled BDD, which is one of the landing or home pages, it shows a little diagram which shows a circle and documents the fact that these stages of discovery, formulation, and automation are applied to a story. So it's very much the story base. So to get to your product or sprint backlog or whatever backlog that you're working in, that's the job for product owners and business analysts and customers to sort of hash out what might be done. And you might use user story mapping or whatever product development techniques that are being used in your organization. But by the time you get down to something that somebody thinks is deliverable as a useful piece of functionality, well, most of us have experienced the fact that those useful pieces of functionality are already quite big, right? Which is why we've got in Jira, I think, concepts of epics, and we have multiple phases of trying to break them down. Well, rather than doing it in an arbitrary way, the discovery phase takes a story. It could be an epic, or it could already be potentially decomposed, and we sit down and we do real detailed analysis on what has to be done to deliver that story. And in the process, we enumerate all of the business rules or business requirements that are embodied by that story. And that allows us to see in much better detail how complicated this story actually is. Like, you can play planning poker and you can argue, and people do argue the toss. So is this a 13 or is this a 15 or whatever it is? But they're doing it based on gut feel, because a story is really hard to size, even relatively to other stories, until you get down into the weeds. And so what the discovery process and example mapping tries to do is classic shift left. We're trying to think about this, test our understanding, test our estimation of the complexity before we commit to anything and before we write a line of code. So it's a long-winded answer to your question. You work on the story, but during discovery, you might discover that story is too big to be a story, and you will split it into multiple stories. So you start work on a story, and it might lead you to multiple stories, and then you just do formulation on one of them, the most high priority one for the next sprint, for instance.
Okay, yeah, that makes sense.
So basically, it is about the details of the stories, to say it short. But whoever starts to do this kind of BDD discovery process are typically quickly realizing that, and that's sometimes causing the confusion that the concept that we are using with discovery, that we are trying to understand the complex requirements by providing examples. So that actually just understanding something complex with examples is a practice that can be used in many different levels as well. So many of my clients were doing it in a way that they started to use these examples in the BDD style and it is under the story, but they realize that that actually their business analysts can also use the same technique when they are talking with the end users or with the potential users as well. Obviously, they would discuss about much higher level examples there, but the benefits are very similar to that. So basically, this specification by example or having a better understandability by example is a more generic pattern that can be used in many different levels. But when we are talking about BDD, basically BDD's focus is the details of the story.
Right, and this is where I believe, and correct me if I'm wrong, this is where you really quiz the stakeholder and think, for a lot of developers in QA or testers, whether they will ask, what if this happens, where the stakeholder will say that will never happen. And you got to grill them some more and yeah, this is probably going to happen. What do we do? Because we need to take care of these edge cases. Is this a moment where you iron out those questions as well?
Yes, but I think there's an interesting line between what is the responsibility by the development team and what are those things that are where we really want to have input from the product owner or from the stakeholder. So I think if I'm just asking in a discovery session that, but what if this and this case happens, and the product owner says that this never happens, that's a valid answer. That means that there are no explicit requirements, business requirements about how that. Of course, the system shouldn't crash and whatever. I, as a developer, should somehow handle this case in a graceful way. But there is no explicit expectations for me. So therefore, it's a little bit tricky. So definitely in a discovery session, we don't want to go through all the edge cases, but we do go through some of the edge cases that are for some reason more important for the business. And this is anyway a discussion and maybe something which sounded to be unimportant for the business is when the team is showing their importance or showing the impact, it becomes important afterwards. So it's never a one-directional communication, I think.
Right. Do you ever do any of your customers, or have you ever seen where the specification that's being drawn up is legally binding, like it's like an end user agreement or something like that? Has it gone that far to where the software development has to, at least agree to what has been brought up with the specification?
So I have seen that. I would say that in my experience, the teams and organizations that adopt behavior-driven development are typically working in agile, using agile methodologies, where the relationship is not like that. So I think it's really difficult. Actually, I think it's impossible to agree a set of specifications up front and then successfully deliver on them and still have everybody who's using the product happy. I think that was one of the problems with Waterfall in the first place. So I don't see it as a huge problem in general. Now, there are still industries where that sort of stuff is bread and butter. It's the absolute. It's what happens. And in that situation, then what happens is that no matter what they say, they could be using Cucumber and Gherkin and example mapping, whatever. But if you have to deliver what you start off with, then you're not working in an agile way. What you're working is you're using, maybe in the lean way, you're using some flow management techniques. You're maybe doing test-driven development, but there's no real communication after the project gets signed off. There'll be a formal RFC process and change requests. But apart from that, BDD really thrives in agile spaces. It's something that I've never seen in the absence of an agile work environment.
All right, Gaspar. So here's one question that made specifically for you, and that is BDD versus ATDD. They look the same. I looked it up on Wikipedia. I couldn't tell the difference between them. I think the Wikipedia articles were terrible. Do you have some enlightenment for us on that question?
So I think nowadays the community is kind of agreeing that these things are basically the same, and I would even add specification by example to this to that as a third element. What you have to see is that BDD is, and even then was phrasing it like that. He was calling it a second generation methodology. And what he meant on that is that there is nothing fundamentally new that BDD introduced, but basically BDD has just picked a couple of useful techniques and put it together to something, a practical methodology or something like that. And because of that, anyone else could have come to the same conclusion, and definitely the direction that or the ideas what was driving the acceptance test driven development movement were very similar to that, and of course you can always think about the focus, or whether you call something a test, whether it's a useful thing to call it a test or it's not so useful thing. These are all little differences of taste and what fits better here or there. But conceptually these things are, I think just simply the same.
We, as part of the icebreaker in one of the Cucumber courses that we give, there's a sort of true false set of questions that we get people to answer in the first 5-10 minutes of the day, and one of them is a statement. It says the only difference between ATDD and BDD is that one was invented in the United States and the other was invented in the UK.
Oh my gosh.
And that's true, right? The only difference is that ATDD came out of the US and BDD came out of London.
Fascinating.
Wow. That's like the UK putting you in color, man.
No, I usually I don't think that I don't know whether ATDD is really a US thing and BDD would be a more UK thing or European thing. I don't think that there is such a difference. I would rather say that it was basically just brought up by two different people, and that's
probably
that's it.
Yeah.
So yeah, Kito, do you have something?
Yeah, I was just going to say, I was wondering what you guys have seen, because what I've seen is areas or situations where like people use, a BDD syntax in order to help write the ticket, but they don't really definitely do that much of a collaborative grooming in terms of generating those examples and everything. But then what I saw happen was that whatever was in the story would end up, essentially in the Gherkin, running Cucumber and everything. But then no one ever looked at it again except for the programmers. And so I'm wondering, like, what is the proper way to do it such that there's still sort of a round trip other than it just going into like programmer land where nobody except the programmers are going to look at it.
Yeah, and if I could just add to that question as well, that was one of the things that I have seen as well, is that it goes into programmer land, and the product I don't know if Kito, if this is the same question, apologies if I mistranslated your question, but does the product owner get locked out after a while?
Yeah, I think it is unfortunately common, but and somehow understandable because doing the testing bit of BDD, like just making a BDD scenario, putting some automation behind it and run it as a test, that's something that is easier to onboard, and therefore the team basically alone, or maybe just a subset of the team can do alone, and definitely the full-fledged discovery, the discussions, that's something that needs a little bit more collaboration actually from that, and sometimes it's hard to make that first step, and usually when I hear that people just write on their scenarios and it happens that nobody is checking them, I think the interesting question is why they are not checking that, and you have to go into a detailed analysis of what's the problem. So how can we make this more usable for us? How can we learn how we can use this documentation? And then there is no one single answer probably. Maybe it will turn out that because it's very hidden and the business don't know how to do a Git checkout or something like that to be able to see the feature files, or maybe it will turn out that the scenarios are not really phrased in a way that they are anyhow useful to look at when you think about your product, or maybe it will turn out that maybe they are just unstructured, and even though that every single scenario makes sense, but there are just 200 of them in random feature files, and therefore you would spend more time finding them than trying it out yourself with a demo application. There can be many answers for that, but unfortunately, or not fortunately, but I think that's what I'm trying to encourage the teams, that they have to make that analysis and they have to figure out. So it will not work in a way that you are just putting the BDD stamp on your project and then suddenly everything will work out magically. But we have to work on that, and every team and every situation is quite different, I think, from this perspective. What is your connection to the business, to the stakeholders? How easy it is to have a discussion with them? What are their fears? What is the trust level? Many of these things have an influence on that, I would say.
Yeah. I mean, I agree there's teams vary massively, but in general, what you're both describing is a process that is not BDD. It's a process of writing tests using Gherkin, which is, although I have spent the past 8 years of my life trying to persuade people that that's a bad idea, I have utterly failed, as have my colleagues. And predominantly that's what Cucumber and SpecFlow get used for. Behavior-driven development starts off with collaboration and supports collaboration. And at that point, the scenarios that get written are written in a way that satisfy the needs of the business, in the sense that they demonstrate what the specification is, at which point the business become thoroughly engrossed in those specifications and will police them massively. So that was the first thing. The first thing is that people generally are not, they're using the tools that were created to support behavior-driven development, but they are not practicing behavior-driven development. And the second thing is that actually we do still have a tools gap. And the tools gap is exactly what Gaspar talked about, which is the fact that the specifications, the scenarios, end up in a source control system somewhere. And although it's absolutely not beyond the wit of man to have those specifications visible on a browser or published to a SharePoint site, or make them accessible to non-technical people who haven't got source control logins, there's currently, Cucumber doesn't support that. SmartBear has not yet released a product that does that. It's hard for people once the specifications get signed off the first time. It's hard for the product owners. It's hard for the business analysts. It's hard for the customers to easily get access to those specifications, and that's also a barrier.
I thought that CI/CD was the key point to that, but I guess that's a good question, because you write a Cucumber in Java. Now, there's one thing to get to the specification, but that's just raw text, for the most part, a .feature file. But is it validated? Like, is it green or is it red? What does that report look like? And how do you share those reports? And here's the thing: there could be multiple projects where these feature files are. They're strewn all over the enterprise, and your product owners need one place to see, here are the specs. Are they green or are they red? And how do you go about doing that? I have no idea myself.
So there is no, various different teams have come up with halfway houses to getting there. Cucumber Limited, before it was acquired, was working on a product called Jam, which was intended to do exactly that. That product, unfortunately, did not really see the light of day. SmartBear is currently, under the leadership of Aslak Helsoy, who is the creative Cucumber, is creating a product called One Report. There you go. It's a web service that sucks up all of your reports from any report producer, including Cucumber or SpecFlow, and then puts them together in a central place. So I'm sure there are other companies and other product teams that are trying to do similar things. And some of my clients that I used to consult with have come up with ad hoc bespoke solutions using shell scripts to bring to bring reports from various different environments together to give an overview of what's happening. But the answer is it's difficult, it's complicated, and no one's done it well.
Yeah.
Okay.
There's another tool I think that makes sense to mention is this from the SpecFlow team. They make a tool. It's very hard to name. SpecFlow plus LivingDoc generator is the tool. It's a free tool that can also generate such kind of document that not only contain the feature files but also the test results. But this is. I will let you make the next question, but I just want to say that it's always very interesting because even in that level, the team setup might be different because ideally, and I have seen it also in the project that I'm doing for myself, that if you really do this properly, then at the end, all of your scenarios are anyway always green. So just seeing the scenarios are sometimes just enough. So I mean, that would be the ideal way, and I don't think it's not possible to achieve that, and therefore I think that the most important value is in the specification, and of course having increasing the trust level by seeing that they are not only specification but they are green is always good. But the best is if you basically get to that point that whenever that particular feature goes out of the hand of the dev team, then it's always green.
Mm-hmm. So that's a great point, actually. The easiest way to take a specification and run the report and get it all green is to put in empty implementations of every step definition. So even if you have a report that shows all of the tests, all of the scenarios are running green, it doesn't actually mean the functionality has been implemented like that. So at some point, the people who are non-technical have got to trust the people that are technical. So I totally agree with Gaspar. The specification is important as a place to record and capture shared understandings of what the system should do. And the real problem is that as the product goes through its development phases, that specification becomes unavailable to the product side of the organization.
Exactly.
Not that they can see whether it's red or green, because actually whether it's red or green is a development concern. It's a quality concern, and they have to develop the product that has been specified.
Right. I think what might help for anyone who's not familiar with BDD, we've sort of explained what BDD is conceptually, talked about in relation to stories. So if you're familiar with Agile at all, you know what we're talking about. And I think the part that we should probably just clarify is that, when you write the feature specification, often it's written using Gherkin, right, which is a specification language, I guess would be a way to describe it. And then you can implement tests that support those features as they're described using a tool like Cucumber and I guess SpecFlow as well, right?
Yes.
Okay. So I just wanted to make that sort of clear. And in that tool, basically, they can generate reports just like any other test runner might, like JUnit or something, that show like whether or not those particular features were satisfied. So that's what they mean by when they're saying green, just the same as when you run like a unit test and you get like a green line, for the unit test passing. So,
right. Is there a yellow like for pending?
Nice.
Yes.
There
are other colors as well. I mean, the color coding is not so standardized, so to say. But especially in the creation phase, obviously there are some phases where we already have the specification but never even started to do the testing.
Right.
There's a phase where we started to do the testing but we haven't finished that, or finished but the application doesn't support that test. So there are several other sub phases within that, and there is. So these tools like Cucumber can have some special outcomes for that.
Right. Okay. So the scenarios and the features that you create, they are not UI tests. I think a lot of developers like to think that, hey, I created a scenario, let's create a Selenium test to back it up. But that's not 100% always the thing. In fact, there's something called a test pyramid that says you should have more unit tests than you should have any kind of UI tests or manual testing. Does that apply to BDD? Does that apply to your scenarios as well? If you have a scenario that could be satisfied by a unit test, should you just do a unit test, or should you do different, or can one scenario be satisfied by both unit, integration, and UI? Do you find that?
So I think the answer is yes to all of these. So definitely BDD doesn't tell you or doesn't prescribe how you should automate that. So I think the best way to see that is that the BDD scenarios are really describing the specification, and it's up to you how you can, what is the best way to increase your confidence about whether your application that you developed is really fulfilling that specification or not. And when I say best way, that doesn't necessarily mean, because somehow maybe philosophically we could say that since the benefits of your application are typically caused to the end users, therefore the best way would be to test the thing through the user interface, because this is what your end users are seeing. Mm-hmm. So this is, I think this is why people are trying to combine this immediately, the BDD scenarios with UI tests. But the problem is that kind of testing is simply not scaling, and you cannot really make as many tests and in a way that it's really giving you fast feedback, and you will be able to maintain that. And this is what we're also basically about what the test pyramid says, that you have to try to find what is the best economical way to increase your confidence for a particular problem, and there is no single strategy here. So yeah, some teams are just trying to map every single scenario, that what is the best way to test that particular scenarios. Some teams are doing the thing that you also said, that the same scenario can be run against different levels of the application, and so many different variations of that. But I think there is one strategy that we can say that is definitely not working if you are trying to, is the one where you are trying to automate all of your scenarios through the user interface. Unfortunately, many teams are trying that, but I have never seen that working, and I think I have seen many of BDD projects failing because of that. So I think I'm pretty sure, I don't know what do you think about that, Seb, but I think that's the topmost reason why BDD projects are failing, that they are just making this equal sign between the BDD scenarios and the UI tests.
I think the top reason that BDD projects fail is because they're not BDD projects. I think the second reason is that people, that the developers and the testers are still, notwithstanding agile teams with cross-functional T-shaped team members, you've got developers who want to write code and testers who are frequently less experienced in writing code, and so the testers are given the responsibility of writing or automating the scenarios, and the easiest way of doing it is with record and playback tools or with scripting, and so the UI is the easiest place to go. And equally, the testers in many organizations don't understand the levels beneath the UI because they don't get exposed to them and aren't part of the design. So there's a real barrier to trying to maintain the business analyst, developer, tester role titles and trying to work in a behavior-driven way that generates living documentation of the sort that we're talking about. Because it's got to be the developers that automate the specifications, because it's the automation that designs the code. That's why it's called behavior-driven development, like it's test-driven development. So it's part of the development activity to automate the scenarios.
If QA and testers do not have access to the source code, is BDD already going to be hard?
Yes.
So I guess my question is, what in sort of your ideal team, I'm sure there's many of them, but in your ideal BDD team, what is the role of the QA or tester, or is it the same thing?
They bring
like a straight up
so,
developer.
So the tester brings test experience. So we know that most developers currently have limited experience of testing. So we need to have that experience, and that experience lives with the tester. So during the discovery sessions, the tester is really essential for asking those questions that developers would normally put their happy hat on and not even think about. So at the beginning, while we're really trying to spec out the detailed requirements, the tester is absolutely essential. When it comes down to picking which scenarios should actually be, which should be automated down at the class or method level, and which might be automated at an end-to-end level, bringing in the tester with some, analysis techniques, right, that they learn in their ISTQC is really valuable as well. Writing the code, it's a great place to have testers and developers pair together. And so basically, the tester still has massive role, and there's also all of the other sort of downstream quality assurance activities, such as load testing or penetration testing, security testing, etc. So there's lots of testing that BDD doesn't even think about addressing, but the tester is valuable throughout the process. It's just not isolated on their own, being told, well, BDD is about testing, and so it's a tester's job to write the automation.
That, yeah, go ahead, Kito, sorry.
No, go ahead.
Oh, I was just going to ask, so can I make a specification that is this particular page or this particular website should handle 1,000 concurrent users and create a load test behind it? Or am I abusing BDD by doing so?
No, you're not abusing BDD, but are you using the best tool? So is Cucumber the right way to automate that sort of behavior? So BDD is not about Cucumber, and it's not actually about Gherkin. It's about agreeing what the specification is, then automating it so that you can, on every build, find out that it's correct. So if that's some one of your requirements that's come out of speaking to your product, your stakeholders, then let's find a way of automating it. It may not be appropriate to do it in Cucumber, or you might want to do it in Cucumber, and then as part of the step definition, you shell out to LoadRunner or something, or Load Ninja or something like that. So let's not try and do it in Java. Let's use the tools that have been designed specifically with load testing in mind. And it's still behavior-driven development. You're saying that's what it's got to do. You put it into the CI/CD pipeline, you get your feedback about whether it works or not. So it's absolutely part of BDD, but it's just not necessarily Cucumber and given when then Gherkin. That's the best way of doing it.
Fine. Have you seen teams that will have like Cucumber tests written, with Gherkin, but then some of the Cucumber tests are integration tests and some are unit tests?
So yeah, only go Gaspar, sorry.
Yeah, so that definitely. So I think if you, my experience was that if you give the team more freedom or empower them to find the best automation solution, then they will automatically find these kind of patterns. So obviously you have to drive it's much practical to drive the system in a different entry point if you are describing how let's say the business workflow works, or when you are talking about how, let's say, the pricing of that particular product works, because for the pricing probably it's anyway implemented by a unit, so it's absolutely unnecessary to flow everything through the different layers just to be able to check whether with this particular product configuration you really got the right price. So I think the answer is yes, and I've seen that.
Yeah, as we're talking, that makes more sense, because in I've been in scenarios where, like, we were writing Gherkin tests or Cucumber tests, and the developer is like, well, I already wrote a unit test for this, and so we'd end up removing it from the feature file because it was already running in a separate test step using like a different runner. And that really wasn't really the best way to handle it, because we were losing the visibility of the actual feature that was being tested. So
it's not so easy to explain that in a podcast, but Seb, it was Seb and Matt, or I don't know who was the other, had a concept about which they were calling Testing Iceberg. If someone is just Googling for that, then they will see the picture. Basically, the concept of the Testing Iceberg says that just imagine the testing pyramid, and you would probably see that some of the tests that you somehow put into the test pyramid are interesting for the business. So they want to understand that requirement and want to confirm that this is really what they wanted. And some of the tests are basically just ensuring the technical excellence of the product. Okay, and that's the good boundary, whether you should do something with BDD or with other testing methods, including.
I'm going to correct you there, Gaspar. Not whether you would do it with BDD, whether you do it with Gherkin and.
Okay. Yes, you are right. Yeah. So,
right.
And basically this line is going across the pyramid. So sometimes there are some technical unit test implemented things where we would like to get feedback, and we would like to make sure that the business is happy with our results, and then those would make sense to do done in Gherkin, and there are some unit tests where we're just making sure that the units, the modules, whatever technical solutions we built up are really working, and they are robust, and whatever other quality aspects the code has.
Excellent.
I like this. So we're putting, by the way, all these links in the show notes at stackpodcast.com. So you can see what he's talking about there.
Yeah. I had a question on, there seems to be a lot of companies with test case management software. And it seems very profitable because everybody wants to ask you to fill in your email address, and then they come back at you later and how can I help you more? Get those $3,000 out of your wallet to use this test case management software. How is that related to BDD? I know a lot of these test case management software will do Gherkin and help you manage your test cases. I don't know if you're familiar with some software, if you have some recommendations, and really just tell us what test case management software is, and should we even use it? I saw some blogs that just like, no, we'll never use that. So what are your opinions, Gaspar and Seb?
So I think I have seen projects, BDD projects, without having a test case management software, and they were running fine. So definitely, I don't think that that's a must-have part of that. On the other hand, what I have also seen, especially with big enterprises that have that had some policies, some bureaucracy around their thing. Of course, we could question whether those are meaningful or not, but definitely you cannot really change the world at one step. So what I see now, and I was, when we were having the chat, or when I was introducing myself, I was talking about this traceability thing that I'm also dealing with. Definitely, the test case management is not a necessary part of that. But if the enterprise otherwise requires to have some test case management tools for whatever reason, then usually that plays well together with BDD, and the BDD scenarios can be quite much connected to the test cases. The product I'm doing is doing that for Azure DevOps test cases, and basically just synchronizes the content and the results of the scenarios to that. And some of my clients of that product have some other sorts of tests, and those are also synchronized, or those are also collected their results into Azure DevOps test cases. So that why not have some shared overview or catalog of all the test cases that you have, if you don't have to work for that, if a tool like that is synchronizing those scenarios to you, and you don't have to really do manual work for that. I think that's a kind of win-win. Let's say it like that.
Yeah, I think the choices between test case, the question you put, which sort of contrasts test case management and BDD, to some extent that they are orthogonal decisions. One is about how you manage your assets and your results, and the other is about a technique or an approach to specifying and delivering well-tested software. I think the place where you get the real pain is exactly as you were mentioning, Dan, which is the test case management tools that make it easy to write tests using Gherkin and calling that BDD, right? So, I've seen a number of them, and I will leave their names out to protect the guilty. But what it does is it encourages people to just use given, when, then as a way of structuring their tests, which is fine. I have nothing against that, but then labels it, gives it a veneer of BDD, and then people have bad results like this because it decays very quickly and nobody's interested, and it rots and it breaks, and then they go, "Oh, BDD's rubbish." That sort of BDD certainly is rubbish, but it's not. It's because it's not behavior driven. It's an approach to using a tool that was designed to support a way of working instead just to write automated tests.
Yeah, that reminds me. I have been at, it was not only one company, but a couple of companies where I was invited as a kind of coach, and they were struggling with this discovery part, and they were when we digged into their process, it looked like that they were coming together. They started to discuss about, they were calling them tests, but actually these were the examples, and they were trying to make them into given, then right at the time, and then they were struggling with that. And when I was just asking that why do you use the given, then keywords, and what kind of help this gives you at that level? And they were saying but we thought that because we're supposed to do BDD, that means that we have to phrase out everything using given and then. And I said, no, just do bullet points or whatever is the easiest for you. And they were saying, this becomes much easier this way. And in a later stage, as we explained, whenever it comes to a real automated, and when the discovery part is finalized and we know what to do and we want to properly document that, that's a much better time to deal with given and then, because that's the time when you can really think about the phrasing, the syntax, the proper sentences, the word orders, and all kinds of things that otherwise just block the creative process of discovery or this brainstorming kind of thing.
Right. And business vocabulary too. Sometimes, that comes out.
So do like BD teams that you work with, do they usually have any manual testers at all, or is it all automated?
The ones that I'm working with have manual testers, and I think exploratory testing is a very great extension to BDD. So definitely BDD is not the one thing rules everything kind of methodology. So BDD scenarios so far we were talking about the process of how we are creating that. But obviously once we have finished a particular feature, a particular story, then the BDD scenarios become regression tests at the end, and they will give you a safety net that the thing that was working is still working well. And from that perspective, they are great regression tests, and therefore if they are done well, they can really replace the classic manual regression testing from that style. However, since those are nicely maintainable automated tests, which also means in practice that they are focused. So they are really checking one thing, like the similar concept like in TDD, we say that single assertion principle, that somehow applies also to BDD scenarios as well. We call them the principle focus. So the scenarios should be really focused on a single business rule. And because they are focused, they cannot really check so easily whether altogether it just makes a nice user journey, and for that exploratory testing is great, and I think that's a place where manual testing always will have some benefits.
Single assertion testing, meaning that you should only test for one particular feature, and that's it. Don't try to overdo it in one particular test. Is that what you mean?
Yes. We phrase it in a way that they should really check one particular business rule, because feature is even bigger than that. But yeah.
Gotcha. So that does bring up a good question. So I think we build distributed systems, right? Or at least systems that are made out of lots of different parts that work together, even if they're not too far apart. So let's say, for example, you've got a bunch of microservices throwing stuff in Kafka, then throws it into some database, and then there's some cache along the way, and then there's some messaging that needs to be sent somewhere. So you may have features that are defined, right? But what approaches have you seen for testing that whole overall flow, other than a tester going in and manually and verifying that each integration point was dealt with properly?
Yeah, I mean, so again, I'm going to refer back to an answer that Gaspar gave earlier. It's about levels of confidence, right? Nothing's ever 100%. But again, when it comes to microservices, I would just apply a similar approach or a similar analogy or metaphor to the pyramid. So in this case, each microservice is a component, and you want to test those to get to the level of confidence where you believe they fulfill the requirement to which they have contracted to give. And my personal way of then making sure that other components work with them correctly is to use contract testing. So I mean, I'm a big fan of a tool called Pact, which allows you essentially to develop components in isolation and yet have a structured and defined way of passing the expectations between them, so that you can run automated tests on the provider of the service to ensure that it delivers what the consumer expects from it. And that will get you to a point, which is the point that I think Gaspar was talking about on the previous question, where your automated tests are running. And then you get to the top of the pyramid and you really want to bring all of these components together and run a few end-to-end workflows, or as we call them in the formulation book, we call them journey scenarios, which basically make sure that you can make the journey, that we're hitting the right endpoints, that we've got the right database credentials, or whatever it takes to make sure that the different microservices will all orchestrate and collaborate together. But you do the whole idea of the pyramid, which I think is often misunderstood, is that the stuff at the bottom is the foundation, right? So when you're testing units or components right down at the bottom of the pyramid, you're not saying the whole system will work together. What you're saying is that each little bit has integrity on its own. And then you move on a little bit and get two components working together. And now you're making sure that the contract between those two components is functional and delivers what you expect. And then by the time you get to the top of the pyramid, you don't need to go through every workflow, every path through the system, because that's an infinite number of paths, or very close to infinite. It'd be insane. You've built your confidence from the foundation up, from little bits to slightly bigger bits to cooperating maybe classes or cooperating microservices. And you need very few tests across the whole product. Once you've got those foundations, to have confidence that the product will deliver. That confidence will not be 100%. But there's not enough time or money or energy in the universe to get to 100%.
Yeah, the analogy I usually use, like in my classes, and you probably disagree with the analogy or agree with it, but automotive industry, a single tire company is going to unit test the heck out of that one particular tire. But once you place an axle on that, once you put the chassis on it, once you put the car on it, the people who are testing the car are not necessarily going to be testing the tires anymore, because that was already satisfied by that unit test for that one particular tire. Same sort of thing here, is that we have huge software, but it's not going to be 100%. There are going to be some gaps along the way.
So I've also used that automotive one. I've got a slide deck from the early part of the noughties where I think about, we call them indicators, the little lamps that click, and then you move up to, well, you have a steering rack and an engine, and these are now higher up the pyramid. And then finally, when you put it together, you will put it on a rolling road, and then you do some exploratory testing by having somebody take it out on the track and try and go around corners really fast.
Right.
Yeah. It's typically for microservices, what I see is that, and this makes BDD a little bit hard, because what I see is that BDD is at the end is going to be the indicator whether you designed your microservices properly. So in many cases where I see companies struggling, be able to make meaningful scenarios and then trying to make the automation on a one particular microservice, at the end it turns out that how they have make the cut or they designed the boundaries of their microservices were not basically service, not business related service sectioning, but somehow technical or any other aspects, and therefore obviously what you will see is that any business functionality can only be tested in the top, which is definitely not useful. But typically when you are coming to that point with BDD, then it's probably too late to redesign the microservice. But in many cases that's the reason for teams struggling with that. And if you dig deeper, then they realize that actually we anyway knew that was a wrong cut to make microservices that way.
And I mean, I think you've got a good point there. It's like when it comes to just microservice design in general, like you really should think more about like what it is, what the business problem is you're trying to solve, rather than how small can you make your microservice, which seems to be a common thread these days. So,
Gaspar, can you tell us about SpecFlow?
Yes, please do.
Yeah, SpecFlow is a nice project. Basically, SpecFlow is the .NET implementation of Cucumber, and it's really started that way. So in 2009, when I started to play with BDD, with the teams that I was working with, we wanted to use Cucumber, but we were working with Microsoft.NET, and it wasn't so easy to put these different platforms together. And basically, this is how I started the SpecFlow project, actually, because my team really struggled with this lot of interoperability between Ruby and .NET, and basically I just put together something which works kind of like Cucumber, and then we decided to make it open source, and it started its own life. And that's actually my first open source project. So this is also where I learned how open source communities and generally open source projects work. So that's the history of that. But I think that definitely for me this was a very interesting journey. First of all, because at that time Cucumber wasn't really specified. So basically, we were just trying out how Cucumber worked, and then trying to guess what was the intention behind it, and we were also trying to adapt that to somehow for the .NET ecosystem, which was at that time quite much heavily based on using Visual Studio and generally about IDEs, which wasn't true for the Ruby community at that time. So for example, for SpecFlow, the IDE integration, Visual Studio integration was always an interesting topic right from the beginning, and some other consequences that were coming up from that. So it's not an exact port because of that, but by now I think anyone who have ever used Cucumber will be quite quickly learning SpecFlow as well, because it's basically they are just working in the same way.
Wonderful. And Seb, you do a lot. I think correct me if I'm wrong, with Cucumber Java And if so, what new things are there? I know for one, the annotations were make things a lot easier for the glue, but I don't know if, and again, I'm assuming that you work with Cucumber Java, but go ahead.
Yeah, so I don't really. So I do very little work with Cucumber Java. The major thing that Gaspar and I actually were paired on a couple of years ago, is it that long, was Gherkin got a new keyword, which is the rule keyword. So I mentioned earlier during talking about discovery, that there's a technique called example mapping, which is pretty well documented online. There are videos and blog posts and whatever about it. But example mapping uses cards, and you have the story that you're talking about in discovery, and then underneath it you have the business rules that will need to be implemented for that story to be considered delivered. And each rule has a set of green example cards that illustrate that rule. Gherkin was created before example mapping had been invented, and we discovered that actually the scenarios map very well to examples, and we needed the rule keyword to map to the business rules, and so we included that. And so that was a new piece that went in. In the Java world, it's pretty much, I mean, there's a few contributors, but Aslak still does an awful lot of work in the Java space. He created the Ruby product, but it's been updated and maintained by a number of people. My colleagues Matt Wynn and Steve Took did a major update of it a few years ago, but it keeps evolving. In the Java space, there are a few people. There's Rien, whose name, he's Dutch. His name is, I think, unpronounceable, which is why he calls himself Rien. But he does most of the work in the Java space. I mean, that's not to say he does all, because there are it's open source, so lots of people contribute as well. But him and Aslak are the folk that really work in Java. And there have been a number of improvements over the years. So the other thing that happened that was a big change was that we moved from, in most of the Cucumber implementations, and there are quite a few, it's not just C# and Java and Ruby, there are quite a few. We moved from regular expressions to Cucumber expressions. So regular expressions are massively powerful, right? But equally,
they are too powerful, actually.
They're too powerful. That's right.
Yeah. They can shoot you, whereas Cucumber expressions are much simpler and are still powerful.
Okay.
What we wanted to move away from was, instead of trying to make sure our products are high quality, we're spending all our time debugging regex, which is really not something that we wanted to encourage people to do. So there've been quite a few things over the years that don't necessarily they haven't made major changes to they certainly haven't made major changes to Gherkin, and they haven't made major changes to the way that Cucumber works on its different language platforms. But there have been incremental improvements, and there continue to be there. So SmartBear, maybe I just give a blow of a trumpet or two. SmartBear is funding full-time development on the Cucumber open source project, and it also is providing a certain amount of funds that is going into what is that charity? Anyway, that allows external open source developers to bill for the work they do on the open source project.
Oh, cool.
So,
wonderful.
There's stuff going on in the Cucumber space.
I want to say one of the features I liked was I had mixed feelings about it, was the Lambda support in Cucumber for Java, because it was kind of a neat way to do it, where you could basically associate Lambdas with a particular step of a scenario.
Mm-hmm.
But I think there are problems mostly was with the tooling. When tooling had no idea what was going on, the tooling one did not support it. But that was kind of a neat feature, which is fairly new, not super new. But.
Yeah, so I think from that perspective, the Cucumber products, doesn't matter which language we are talking about, are somewhat bound together with the IDE support nowadays. So especially if you have a fairly big project, it's not magic, but simple just jumping to the step definition based on the step. These are super important things that you are doing 100 times a day if you are developing there, and therefore it's always hard to introduce any fancy features like lambdas, which are generally great, and I think they are just fitting to the purpose. But But on the other hand, you have to keep up with all the different IDEs that are typically updating their tooling much slower, and they still need to support multiple different versions, and there is a huge complexity there, and therefore I think feature-wise the Cucumber products are generally pretty reserved in putting many new features, partly because I think the job what we are doing here is not very complex. So I think I did the first version of Cucumber in a week or two, so definitely it wasn't it sounds bad, but it's not a very super complex product, let's say it like that. Of course it has its own complexity in different parts, but it's a simple tool that does the job. And in the beginning, I have seen that there were many people implementing and re-implementing Cucumber in many different languages, and which is fun because I mean it's a doable job. It's not especially if you let's say just do it for English language or something like that. But the point is anyway how you are making your scenarios, and at the end how you automating that, and Cucumber is just a very, very small player in between that.
Okay, cool. I think Seb, you have a hard stop in about 10 minutes. Is that correct?
That's right. Yeah.
Okay. So
yeah.
So Dano,
Yep.
fire away another question too, then I wonder when.
Yeah. So I'd like to thank Seb Rose for introducing me to cyberdojo.org.
Yeah.
And CyberDojo is a way that it's mostly TDD, and you can collaborate with people around the world. I go there to find test-driven development challenges, and I think they're great. cyber-dojo.org. And in just a little bit about some of the history there, Seb?
Yeah, I mean, CyberDojo is almost entirely the creation of a colleague of mine called John Jagger, who is a wonderful trainer. And he experienced just one too many times going to do a training course and finding out that none of the developer laptops had been set up correctly, and spent the first morning, wasting time setting up their laptops. So CyberDojo is an online pair programming development platform, not maybe development platform is stretching it too much, but it supports learning test-driven development, and it supports learning test-driven development using multiple languages, each language probably with multiple different TDD frameworks, and in fact over the years we've extended it and added some of the BDD automation tools as well. So you can practice with Cucumber for Java, Cucumber with Ruby, Cucumber JavaScript, with SpecFlow. I think Cucumber Python we've done one with as well. So there's a lot of stuff there that you can do. But essentially what it is it means that you can practice with a given language and a given test framework without having to do any installs on your laptop. You can play it on your phone or your iPad on the train or on a bus. And you can just practice away. It then works really well for meetups and for group trainings, because what it's so the setup is about katas. So it's set up. So the idea is that you can spin up a kata, and lots of different people can then all work on the same kata. They're not working on the same code, but they're working on the same kata, and you can see their progress as they go through the kata in a dashboard. And that dashboard shows red, green, and yellow traffic lights. And you can, John's got some wonderful stuff that goes along with this, but essentially if you're working TDD correctly, what you'd expect to see is a red showing that you've just written a test that's failing, and then a green showing that you've succeeded, and then a number of other greens showing that you've done some refactoring. And so the pattern you're looking for is red, green, green, red, green, green, green. And then it helps you because you've got 10 teams working maybe at a meetup, each working on a different kata, and you go to the dashboard and you see red, 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 red. Something's not right there. Or red, orange, 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 orange. You can begin to go and ask people, it gives you great teaching opportunities. The other joy is every time you press the test button, the code, a snapshot is recorded, and for posterity, you can go back at any time and step through the exact steps, the exact changes that were made from one test, from one execution of the test to the next. And that then allows you to do exemplar TDD katas, and other people can watch them and then try them on their own. So it's just got a lot of great features. It doesn't have a lot of standard IDE stuff, so it's got no auto completion. It has very limited text highlighting and things like that. But what it does do, it does really, really well, and I love it.
Yeah, it's great.
It's really cool. I want to use that next time. I don't teach TDD, but I just want a tool like that next time I do training. In general.
That's right. So so I told you I was going to tell you my failure story. So I went to Cyber Dojo, but this one is like I had them work on their IDEs. But in my one of my downfalls is my arrogance. And so I went into class all high and mighty, and I said, let's go to Cyber Dojo and pick anyone. And wrong, don't do that. I mean, yeah, for a class, but you have to have some kind of preparation at least, I think, because some of them are really easy, some of them are really, really hard. And I didn't think this one would fail me, but it was tennis. And we were doing TDD with tennis, and yikes, like the love 1530. But then when it gets to the advantage part, boy, we were having a heck of a time. But it was, I didn't tell anyone to think about the design beforehand before doing TDD, and that was my failing. We got a lot out of it. I don't think it was an absolute failure, but we had a lot of like if-else statements that were just like coagulating like in one particular part. And I'm like, man, that one didn't go quite as well as I wanted to. Then I got on the ferry in San Francisco, and then I realized, state pattern would have just like been wonderful. Like have one object that represents 15 and what is the next state 30. And you could very well unit test that one a little bit better. So there's some good challenges there, but that was my failure story.
Excellent. The one that I most like is called Print Diamond. And if you haven't tried Print Diamond, go give it a shot.
Print Diamond is amazing. Yeah, I did that one. I had a heck of a time with that one. That one's actually really hard in TDD because you have to take almost like a leap of faith. So you have, in TDD, you start with zombies. Zombies is 0, 1, many, boundary, interface, and exception. And S is keep it simple. So it's like you start off with a diamond of like 1 asterisk. I don't know, was it an asterisk or number? I forgot what it was. But then...
Yeah, whichever. Yeah. It's letters actually. Starts with A and then B and C. Yeah. Oh,
that's right. A, B, and C. And then there's like, for me, when in my TDD practice of that one, there was just like a leap. Like I didn't have like, usually in TDD, I just turn the difficulty up every little bit and I'm guided along the way. But this one had more of a leap to it. That's just like, oh my gosh, where do I go?
So then here's a link. If you do a research for recycling TDD, it's a blog post I did a few years ago, which is based on the Print Diamond approach. And there's no leap of faith in that one. It does exactly what you just said, but it turns it on its head a little bit. So it's worth having a look at that.
All right.
A few great people came up with that one.
Oh, that's great. Yeah. Because I know sometimes in TDD, there is that leap of faith that you're trying your best to increase the difficulty, but sometimes it's, small difficulty, small difficulty, small difficulty. And then after that test, it's just like, I got to leap here because, now it just really got difficult. Fantastic.
Yeah, and those things are very important because I think what we forget about is this problem decomposition, and that's what TDD is about, right? So, and it looks like that you are learning about how to do better coding, but actually what you are learning is about how to do better problem decomposition, and that's very valuable also for BDD. So in many cases, when we do the discovery part, actually the real trick is that how we can slice it up into some meaningful parts that makes sense.
And that's hard. That's actually really hard. And that takes a lot of experience to identify the things that you need to break up. But
yeah, definitely. All right. Well, Seb has to drop. So Seb, thank you so much for joining us. Gaspar, can you stick around for a few more minutes?
Yeah, sure.
All right.
All right. Thank you, Seb, for everything. Appreciate it.
It was great
We need-
listening to you, man.
We need to do this a yearly thing because I always want to pick up on some of the new stuff.
We should do that.
Have a good day, folks.
All right. Same to you. Thanks again.
Bye.
That was awesome. What was I going to say? I'm curious about this. I'm totally lost in your diamond discussion. So now
yeah, it's a diamond. I'll try that one with BDD and see what happens.
Actually, I have to tell a story which came to my mind, that I was sitting in a bar with Seb and someone else, and they started to talk about some TDD kata challenge that I wasn't aware of. And they were just keep talking about that. And they were thinking about it. How did you, oh no, there should be the way to the, and I was just, okay, guys, okay, let's move on. It's very hard to not get lost if you, if you are not in it.
Yes. So if I search for diamond kata, would that, or should I look for it? Now I have to find a link for it.
I think it's in Cyber Dojo.
So if I go in Cyber Dojo, I can.
Yeah. So you could just, you could say, create a new practice. And I forgot the name of it. I thought it started with diamond, but I thought I found it there.
Version 8 queens? No. Great.
Print diamond. There it is. Yeah. Print diamond. I don't think there's a hard link, so I don't think you can permalink it.
Okay.
But if you go there on choose exercise, go down to the P's and you'll find print diamond.
Okay.
And now the interesting question is whether we should read first Seb's blog post or try first. No, yeah, right. So that would be cheating, right?
I'm a strong advocate of suffer-driven development. And I actually say that in all my classes, like, I'm doing this to make you suffer, and I have no qualms of telling you that. Suffer first, and then we'll apply the bomb later.
Yeah.
Nice. Where do we have the Cyber Dojo link? Okay. Next to
but Cyber Dojo is absolutely great. There are some of them. Change counter or count coins is a hard one. FizzBuzz, of course, is easy. You know what? FizzBuzz is not easy. Depends who you are. Like if you already know about FizzBuzz and you're already an experienced developer, FizzBuzz is easy. But get someone fresh out of university or just someone who's beginning to do programming. You end up doing this thing called chasing your tail, where you solve for one. And if you don't have like a good TDD, and it's a wonderful TDD example, because what I like about FizzBuzz is that you have to think about extracting the actual problem minus the for loop. And actually, you know what? I'm going to change my answer here. FizzBuzz is evil. It's absolutely evil because the way it's worded, write a program that prints the numbers from 1 to 100, and humans read top down. And so programmers will say, okay, I'm going to start with 1 to 100. That's not the problem. Yeah. The iterating is just like a side effect. You just push that out of the way. And that's why it's evil, because that's the first sentence. The real problem is do the multiples. Isolate that part, do your test-driven development for that, and then the for loop is inconsequential. But we humans read top-down, and we think we have to follow orders in that top-down approach. But you have every right and reason to disassemble, to componentize, as Gaspar was talking about, and think about the components and how they can interact with one another.
Yeah. I think the FizzBuzz is also tricky because I think it's very good to get into this kind of thinking if somebody is really willing to. But I had troubles using FizzBuzz if someone was this kind of superstar devs who want to prove that TDD is not necessary and they can anyway make their code perfect even without TDD. And at the end, I mean, there are some people who can just flesh out the FizzBuzz solution without tests. So usually, if I sense that such kind of people are in the group, I rather choose some problem where it's impossible to flesh out the solution.
Yeah. But the thing is, even if you try to do it without tests, the FizzBuzz, you seal yourself off with that for loop, and that's really hard to get a unit test around that too. So, just by doing it test last, you find yourself trapped. You have to extract that. part
Usually
out.
these people don't say that not test less or test first, but just code. For that, you don't need a test. That's what they say.
Right.
Yeah, there are those few people that can just bang out stuff that works without.
Yeah, that's true.
But I'm not one of those people. So I mean, my code works when I'm done. Don't get me wrong. but I do have to write tests.
And I have to.
Otherwise, I'm not confident.
Yeah, because I'm fairly confident in my programming skills. I'm pretty confident if I could hack something, I would do well. But I'm never at peak. Like I'm tired. I could be sick. I could, not have a good day. I could be bummed out.
There could always be scenarios that you didn't think of. Edge cases.
And I'm human, and so that's the thing I'm scared of, which is why I do TDD. Not, I'm good on my skills, but I'm human, and that's the thing I need to recognize.
And I think it's also like somehow similar also to book writing that you have something in your mind and you are fleshing it out to words or to code. And since you know what you wanted to write, therefore you don't even spot out some obvious mistakes in your code or in your sentences. So yeah, that's something that we have to people have to just acknowledge or just understand that you are biased to, because you did the code, and therefore you will not have a separate view on that. And the test is a different view on your code. So that's a way to jump out of your thinking and see it from a different perspective, the things.
Right. All right. Well, it's been a while, so I think we should probably try and wrap up. We're not going to do any news stories because we've had such a wonderful conversation here. I did want to move to picks, but before we get to that, are there any final comments about testing BDD? We should plug your book, right? We've got.
Let's show the books. Yeah.
Yeah.
Gaspar, since this is going to be on YouTube, flash those books at us.
So now I don't know which one is left and right or whatever. So these are their books.
So Discovery is the first one. Formulation is the one that will be out.
Right?
There you go. Yeah, you got it.
I see it in mirrored.
Right. Formulation came out last year, right?
Yes.
And then you're working on a new one, right?
Yes, we are working on the third one. That will be longer a little bit. So the third one is going to be about the technical part, so the automation part. So the working title is BDD Automation Patterns, and basically there we would like to have a catalog of different automation patterns that work well with BDD. That's our goal, and our vision is that to make something like a little bit like the Gov book, so the Django 4 book about the design patterns, and for this book we are going to be only the editors of the book, and we invited a couple of people to share their patterns, share their small little tricks that they use to make their automation solution better or better maintainable. So that's what we are working on right now.
Very cool. Yeah, I definitely. I feel like I need to go out and get both of your books now. So definitely. So thank you so much for joining us. I have a couple of picks I wanted to do quickly. Did you have any, Dano or Gaspar? Did you have anything that you thought was cool you wanted to talk about?
Oh yeah. Go ahead. But okay. I'll try to find.
I have a question, Dano. Where'd you get that shirt?
Someone gave it to me for I think my last birthday. But yeah, it's pretty awesome.
I like it. Yeah. So they had it made.
I think it was on Amazon, I guess. So yeah, look for Duke Java T-shirt. It's one of my favorites.
I like it. Yeah.
Cool. There we go. I've never modeled on a podcast.
First time.
So thanks for that opportunity.
So I listen to a lot of podcasts. Ironically, I don't listen to a lot of technical podcasts because I think I use it as a way to listen to some of my other interests. I listen to a lot of financial ones. But I did also started listening to ones on startups, and there's a series about called, what's the series? It's called Acquired. Is the podcast, but I ran across this episode with Brendan Eich, who's the inventor of JavaScript, and he was the chief architect at Netscape and Mozilla, and now he's the CEO of Brave, which is one of those other browsers that not too many people use, but the interview is really interested if you're interested in sort of the evolution of the web, and if you remember like the browser wars and Netscape and all that kind of fun stuff. It's just a really interesting interview. Because of his interview, I was like, well, why don't I try out this Brave browser, because it's actually a Chromium-based browser, and it blocks all the ad trackers and all the trackers and stuff that are used. And they said it's faster, and I'm always interested in faster. So I tried it out, and I actually switched. I actually just imported all my Chrome stuff and just switched to Brave. And I still use different browsers. I actually use on a daily basis, like, a main browser, which now is Brave, and then I'll use Firefox, I'll use Safari. I stopped just using one browser. I just kind of use different ones. It's also an easy way to have a different context as opposed to going incognito or whatever. But like, I've been very impressed with it. And it's really kind of creepy when it shows you the list of all the different trackers on any site that it blocked. So if you're interested in, especially if you're one of those, I'm really not that crazy. I'm not like paranoid about privacy like a lot of people, but if you are, you should definitely use Brave. But if you just want to try out a new browser that still is Chromium based, it's a good choice. So
very cool.
Those are my
it has a very, very interesting business model. And with all of these browsers, I'm always interested in the business model behind, because it's easy to make a browser which is just removing all the adverts and the tracking things. But how do you finance that thing? And I think the Brave has a very interesting one, because it's a kind of voluntary. You can opt in for seeing some ads, and then you can earn some. So there is some sort of, it's not gamification, but you can earn some money even, or I don't know what it is. So at least some points that you can spend.
Points or something.
Something like that. Yeah.
But it's like a blockchain based, but you can still use it as a currency. So they also have their own search engine now, which is kind of weird. Apparently it's not apparently DuckDuckGo the backend is Bing, and their backend, I don't know what it is. I don't know if they wrote it themselves or what. So of course there's the default engine in Brave. So I've been using it just to see what it's like, but occasionally I just have to go back to Google to get good results. So I don't know. All right, so Dano left us right before he was supposed to get his pick. All right, and he's got a cool Java cap in his little. Oh, there he is. Hey.
Yeah, sorry, I had it.
It's okay. I forgive you. So, did you come up with a pick yet?
For me, I was looking at Locust. It looked pretty interesting. Locust.io for load testing. So it just came across my radar. To be honest, I haven't used it yet, but it looked fairly interesting, and it looked like it had a really nice way of showing the results. It is Python based, but I won't hold it against them, but it looked pretty awesome. And that's at locust.io.
I've actually used it before. I like it.
Oh, you have? What do you think?
Yeah, I mean, I didn't, it was more, basically I got to use it as a prototype. Where I worked, we had, they built a few different things on top of Locust, and I did a prototype with it. But I liked it. It was nice. And at that place we were using Python for a lot of testing anyway, so it kind of fit into what we're doing pretty well, and it was really easy to use, and I liked it a lot. So I think
the other one is I don't know if I mentioned this in a previous podcast, but the period key on your keyboard is a recommendation.
I think
I'll give you some more information. If you go to a GitHub repository that you have, hit the period key. And I will leave it at that.
All right. Now I've got to do it right now. I mean,
Yeah, go to a GitHub repository and just hit the period key.
okay, I'm freaked out now. Is this so it's basically just loading VS Code.
Wow, an IDE.
So
This is looks
VS
like
Code.
it's the VS Code somehow. Yeah.
Right, it's all owned by Microsoft now. So
you go to any repo, you press period, and it loads up VS Code in your browser.
yes.
How did you discover that?
Yeah.
I don't know, actually. I think Twitter has like an amazing set of tips, but sometimes you just got to catch it on the timeline because sometimes it passes. I just got lucky, and I think someone had mentioned from GitHub that, hey, there's a period in GitHub, and then if you do that, you open up a IDE. Now the thing that I see is that like you can't compile Java. I think what that's going to lead to is that you're going to have to use GitHub Actions to do all your compilation and things like that. But I think when you save this, then it's automatically going to use GitHub Actions. So I think in the immortal words of Admiral Akbar, it's a trap. Because once you start developing like on this platform, I suspect that you have to buy into everything else. So GitHub Actions and a few other things like that.
And what's weird is like it looks like I can even install extensions. And what am I installing the extension into?
Yeah, but the thing I found out is the extensions are very limited. So and that's the other trap. That's the other Admiral Akbar trap, is that it'll say if you want to use extension, then you have to use, I don't know, cloud. I forgot what the word was. You have to do Cloud Plus or something like that. But I don't know. I think the reason I'm interested in this is, Seb and I and Gaspar and we're talking about, the beauty of Cyber Dojo was that, you don't have to wait for people to configure their laptops correctly.
Yeah.
I'm interested in that here, in that there's already an IDE. It work-ish. I don't think it's as fully featured, or I have to use it some more, but everything's on here online, ready to go. And if you have a GitHub action on it, then you can watch it compile or test or do whatever.
So it looks like this is essentially, it says GitHub Codespace, which I think is the whole like.
Oh, I think that's what it is. Yes.
Yeah. I think I did hear about that. Fascinating. Okay. Yep. GitHub Codespaces came out.
Right.
Yes. So yeah, it's like a shared, it's a remote workspace.
So this is a drug dealer sort of thing, giving you a taste for it, and then you have to buy everything else.
And it's fascinating because when VS Code, when I first came across it and realized that it was actually really good, I still use it on some projects. I was like, what is Microsoft's end game for this? Because they're putting a lot of resources into this thing, and it's free. And once they got GitHub, it sort of became more apparent. They have. I was talking to someone about GitHub. What is it? CodeQL, which is like a code query language, which they use for their GitHub Enterprise security scanning stuff, which is cool. And you can use it to help tailor how it does security scanning and all that kind of stuff. But they have some amazing integration with CodeQL inside of the IDE, but it's only in VS Code, and they killed the versions for IntelliJ or Eclipse or anything else. So that's my only concern. It's like they're doing some amazing stuff, but the whole like vendor sort of lock-in thing it's real now for them, which is kind of a shame.
Right.
So. All right, so we should mention we've got some other podcasts that are in our network. We have Breaking into Open Source, which puts out an episode every now and then, Off Heap, and Java Pubhouse. So if you're interested in podcasts, you can check them out. Obviously, they're all related to programming technology with some Java thrown in, and you can find them at Pubhouse Network. Pubhouse.net. And also, we've got some events to just tell you about. Java Day Istanbul is May 27th and 28th this year. Jakarta Tech Talks is happening all year. It's virtual, so every month there's a talk about something related to Jakarta EE or macro profile. Dev Nexus 2022. It will be here in April 11th through 13th in Atlanta, Georgia, in the US. And that is in
there.
Person. You will? I'm jealous.
I know. Yeah, in person. Yeah. So we're trying it. We'll see what happens.
Yeah, we'll see. And I know the organizers have tried lots of them in person before, or at least a few. So I know they're psyched to do it now. So I think April will be good. I think that'll actually work out. If it were like in the fall, I mean, who knows what's going on in the fall? But
yeah, I think what I'm doing is I'm riding the wave. So I'm hoping things would go well. I know Europe right now is having a hard time with coronavirus. I don't know how this works anymore. Like I think I know how this virus works, and the virus says no, you don't. And so I think we're going to have to be riding some waves of, wait for the peaks to finish, and then we'll do some conferences and base it upon last year's coronavirus spikes. It's probably the best thing we could do, I guess.
Yeah, and even that's difficult because there may be new strains that mess up the cycles. But yeah. So JFocus, May 2nd through 4th in Stockholm, Sweden. Software development. I really can talk, I swear. Software design and development, May 16th through 20th in London. And you guys mentioned the Agile 2022, which I guess Seb will be at.
Yes, Seb will be there. Yeah.
Okay. And that's July 18th through 20th in Nashville, Tennessee. And Mr. No Fluff Just Stuff, take it away.
So we have, I'm not going to go through dates. You can take a look at the show notes, but we have St. Louis, we've got Dallas, we've got Nova, we got Ohio in Columbus, we got Iowa in Des Moines. Our big event, one of them is going to be ArchConf Central. So we're going to have two ArchConfs. One is Central in Chicago, June 6th through 9th. Great Lakes is also Chicago, which is kind of weird. Oh, I guess there's going to be just a Chicago standard no fluff the day after ArchConf. I guess that makes sense. And then the big one, UberConf in Denver, will be July 12th through 15th. All no fluff events require proof of vaccination, just FYI.
Aren't some of them hybrid now?
Yeah, they're all hybrid.
They're all hybrid.
And that's where I get this headset, which is bone conductive that I can also hear and talk.
The cool headset. Nice.
Yeah, no, I just added one to the list. The Eurostar Conference will be in Copenhagen in June. That will be my first in-person conference for after a long time. So I'm
good for you. Good for you.
Really looking forward to that. That's something that I was missing quite much in the lockdown.
I did miss it too. Like when I did a presentation and talked to people and just had fun. I didn't really think that was a thing I'd ever miss, or I just took for granted. I enjoyed the video conferences like this, but in person, I never thought I'd be that person that would miss human interaction in person. But I did. It was man, that was thrilling.
Yeah. I can tell. I'm the same way. I think it took me several months before I was like, wait a second, this is actually bothering me.
That's right.
And then I was like, I don't get to go anywhere. I liked going on my business trips, and yeah.
I'm not there yet, but
oh well. And Eurostar, what's the core topic there?
It's basically a general testing conference.
Okay.
Yeah.
Very cool.
Excellent.
All right. Well, we've come to the end of another Stacked podcast. So Gaspar, thank you so much for joining us. We appreciate it.
Thank you for the invitation.
That was really great. Yeah, that was awesome.
And hopefully we will get you guys back again, because this has been great. And I know it'll be interesting if we do this again in a year or so, and then we get the other guys on here. It'll be a totally different direction, which will be nice. So all right. Well, thanks again, and we will see you next month. All right, you can find us at stackpodcast.com and in your podcast feed, wherever they may be.
Oh, right. And by the way, I don't know, do we have, since we're doing more YouTube now, I guess show notes should be there on YouTube as well?
Oh,
we'll find out. We'll do the homework on that.
Yeah, we'll do that.
Yeah.
All right, thanks again. Bye-bye.
Thanks, everybody. Thanks, Gaspar.
Bye.